What shadows linger in the silence of a prison chamber, when the crackle of fire has long faded and the scent of smoke hangs like a memory in the air? In that moment before dawn, when the first pale light brushes the ancient stone of forgotten halls, one can almost hear the whisper of those who came before, voices stretched thin by agony, their truths consumed by flame yet lingering in the ether like a chorus of ghosts. The blazebok, with its frame of rough-hewn timber and cruel purpose, was more than an instrument of punishment. It was an altar of fear, a crucible where body and soul alike were tested against the elemental hunger of fire. The village, squares, and castle courtyards of the 14th century had grown accustomed to the ritual of spectacle. Intertwined with justice, smoke coiled into the low-hanging fog of early mornings, and the fire's glow turned the eyes of the accused into mirrors of their own terror. Yet what makes the blazebok so haunting is not merely the flames that lick the ankles or thighs of its victims, but the silence in which those flames operated, a quiet that seemed to absorb the cries and twist them into a language only the fire could understand. Chroniclers, their pens quivering with horror, spoke of victims who, in their final moments, whispered of melodies they had never known, as if the blaze itself had seized their very memories and folded them into some hidden, arcane song. In the chambers where inquisitors measured faith against fear, where priests and magistrates balanced law and legend, the blazebok became an instrument of both revelation and obscurity. Was it merely a device to punish, or did it serve a darker purpose, to reach into the hidden recesses of the human mind, to extract not confession but essence? Monastic records hint at ritual chants and prayers that accompanied the igniting of the fire, words meant to sanctify or perhaps to ensnare, weaving flame and faith into a tapestry of terror. Yet the secular accounts speak plainly: flesh charred, screams extinguished, bodies left as testament to the inexorable hunger of wood and flame. Across centuries, the line between reality and myth has blurred. Tales of the blazebok reach far beyond the walls of its earliest use, carried on the lips of those who witnessed, embellished in dark whispers around hearth fires, and recorded in fragile parchments whose ink is faded but whose dread remains palpable. Some historians debate whether it was ever widespread, or if it existed primarily in the imagination of a terrified populace, a story given form in wood and iron. Yet even if the device was never as ubiquitous as legend suggests, its presence lingers in the mind. The notion that human ingenuity could so meticulously choreograph suffering, turning it into both punishment and performance, both fear and fascination. The fire itself becomes a metaphor for the human condition, for the fragile boundary between endurance and annihilation. What the blazebok consumed may have been flesh, but perhaps it also consumed dignity, hope, and even memory, leaving behind a shadow of the soul that is harder to measure than any wound. And in that quiet, after the flames die down and the smoke curls into the rafters, there is a lingering question that has persisted through centuries. What survives in those who are burned, and what lives on in the minds of those who remain to remember? The answer, like the device itself, is a crucible of fire and shadow, where the line between legend and reality melts into something neither wholly mortal nor entirely imagined. It is in this haunting space between history and myth that the blazebok exists, a symbol of the darkest corners of invention, a testament to the lengths human hands will go to impose order, extract truth, and enforce obedience. The timber may have rotted, the coals long since cooled, but the memory of its flames persists, etched into collective imagination as a reminder of how fear can be engineered, ritualized, and immortalized. There is a rhythm to its terror, a cadence to its cruelty, and within that rhythm, one can almost hear the pulse of a world shaped by smoke, shadows, and the whispered flames of what was once real and what will always remain legend. The fire, in the end, teaches a quiet lesson. It is not only the body that burns, but the stories it leaves behind, the echoes of suffering that ripple across time, illuminating both the darkness of the past and the fragile light of remembrance. Even now, in the hush before midnight, when the world seems suspended in sleep, one can imagine the soft crackle of the blazebok's fire, a sacred and terrible witness to the human capacity for both creation and destruction. And as the mind drifts in the quiet candlelight, one realizes that the true horror is not in the flames themselves, but in the way memory and legend have allowed them to burn forever. What sorrow lingers in the stillness of a hall, when the only sound is the faint scrape of iron against stone? In the cold, shadowed chambers of medieval justice, the iron chair waited in silence, a testament to human ingenuity twisted toward Cruelty, its seat, studded with spikes, gleamed dimly in torchlight. Its back, a lattice of cold, unyielding steel, promised no comfort, only judgment. The very air round it seemed to hum with a quiet menace, as if the metal itself remembered every soul it had held, every secret drawn from trembling lips. The year is the 14th century, a time when plague and superstition walked hand in hand through Europe's narrow streets. Markets buzzed with the uneasy chatter of those who feared both pestilence and priestly scrutiny. In the courts of stone, justice was as much theater as law, and the iron chair became both instrument and symbol, a silent arbiter that demanded obedience, confessions, and fear. Here, in halls lined with banners faded by time, the accused were brought to answer for sins both real and imagined, their fates balanced upon the whim of judges and inquisitors who treated cruelty as method and mercy as weakness. The mechanics of the chair were deceptively simple. Straps and chains bound its victims, pressing them against the spikes with unyielding precision. Hours could pass in slow agony, the body learning the language of pain in every nerve, joint, and sinew. Some chroniclers suggest that the chair was crafted by smiths, who whispered incantations into its rivets, binding not only flesh but spirit, as if the iron itself could discern guilt from innocence. The effect was both physical and psychological. A prisoner could not move without wincing. Every breath became a hymn of trembling flesh. Yet the terror was not purely in the spikes. The chair had a way of bending time. One arc could stretch into eternity, the mind unspooling under the quiet insistence of pain. Prisoners would sometimes confess to deeds they had never committed, imagining shadows in the corners of the chamber as witnesses to their guilt. Some accounts speak of victims staring into the cold stone walls and seeing visions, angels weeping beside them, specters of ancestors, or dark shapes lurking just beyond the torchlight. The iron chair seemed to amplify not only fear, but imagination, leaving its mark on memory long after the flesh had been released. Legends whisper of nights when the halls were empty, yet a low lament rose from the chamber, a sound of metal remembering every story it had absorbed. Scholars of later centuries debated whether such accounts were fanciful exaggerations, the products of imaginations sharpened by whispered tales. Yet surviving sketches of the chair, tucked into musty tomes and forbidden scrolls, hint at the truth, a device as much spiritual as physical, designed to interrogate both the body and the conscience. The iron chair vanished from historical records with the Age of Enlightenment, yet its shadow endures, a silent echo of a time when cruelty could be engineered with precision and patience. What is most haunting about the iron chair is the question it leaves behind. Was it merely a tool of flesh and bone, or did it become something more, a repository of suffering, a silent witness to every confession, every lie, every terror that passed through its grasp? Perhaps the spikes recorded not only pain, but despair. Perhaps the chains absorbed the secrets of those bound. On nights without moon, when silence thickens like fog and the world holds its breath, it is said that a faint sigh can be heard from the chamber, a melody of suffering suspended in time. In reflecting upon such a device, one begins to understand the subtle artistry of terror. Fear, when meticulously designed, has a voice as resonant as any human tongue. The iron chair did not scream, it did not beg, it did not boast, it simply waited, and in waiting, it imposed a stillness more terrifying than any cry. Perhaps the most lasting cruelty of all is not in the pain inflicted, but in the way memory carries it forward. How legend preserves the echoes of suffering for centuries to come. Even now, in quiet libraries and dimly lit museums, when a scholar traces the worn sketches of iron and rivet, there is a sense of being observed by the chair itself. One cannot help but feel the weight of its silence, the patient judgment encoded in steel, and the stories it has carried like embers waiting to ignite. The iron chair teaches us a subtle lesson, that ingenuity, when wedded to fear, can bind more than flesh. It can bind memory, imagination, and the very pulse of the human soul. And so the hall grows silent once more, the torch flames flickering, shadows curling like smoke along the walls. The chair sits empty, yet in its emptiness, it hums with remembrance, a silent song of anguish that drifts through centuries, reminding us that some inventions are not mere tools. They are witnesses, archivists of terror, and keepers of the fragile, trembling line between fear and obedience. Have you ever wondered how a whisper can become a scream? How silence, patient and unbroken, can bend into agony in the cold, shadowed heart of medieval dungeons, where torches cast trembling light across wet stone walls and the air smelled of iron, smoke, and despair, there existed a device that embodied the cruelest patience of human design. It was called the rack, a simple plank framed with ropes and wheels. Yet its effect was anything but simple. One turn of its mechanism could stretch sinew and spirit alike, unspooling secrets from lips that would otherwise remain mute, and transforming the body into a testament to the inexorable passage of fear. The setting is 15th century Europe, in a castle or fortress whose stones had borne witness to generations of justice and vengeance. The dungeons beneath echoed with the drip of water from ceilings blackened with mold, and the silence seemed almost tangible, pressing against the ears of those who were brought there. Victims were laid upon the plank, shackled at wrists and ankles, and the first turn of the wheel sent tremors through muscles unaccustomed to such strain. Bones creaked and groaned, cartilage protested, and the body itself seemed to argue against its own extension. But the human mind, even in terror, clung to hope, however faint. Those who operated the rack approached their work with meticulous patience. Some chroniclers described the slow rhythm of the wheel, a cadence that was almost musical, as if pain itself could be orchestrated. Hour by hour, the body stretched further than it had ever known, sinews pulled tight until the flesh became taut as a bowstring. The victim's breathing grew shallow, and the mind, once focused on survival, began to wander into strange and shadowed realms. They confessed to crimes they had not committed, whispered truths they had never spoken, and even imagined conversations with angels or demons who hovered just beyond the flickering torchlight. Some claimed to see visions of the future or of impossible geometries, as if the body's torment had opened a door to another dimension where pain and revelation danced hand in hand. The rack was more than a device of extraction. It was a catalyst for the unraveling of reality. Confessions did not emerge from truth alone, but from fear, hallucination, and the delicate weaving of hope and terror. Some prisoners, rendered delirious, would speak of shadows crawling beneath walls, voices rising from the stones themselves, and lights that glimmered where none should exist. Chroniclers, often monks or court scribes, tried to record these events, but the language faltered beneath the weight of horror. How could one capture the groan of stretched flesh, or the twisting of thought under duress? Their quills trembled, their hands ink-stained, yet some of those records survived. Fragments that hint at what it felt like to be suspended between flesh and revelation, between memory and nightmare. And yet, beyond the physical horror, there was a haunting enigma in the rack's use. What became of those who survived? Some were broken in body, others in spirit, and still more seemed to carry back into the light of day a shadow that clung to them, visible only in the hollow echo of their eyes. The rack was patient. It did not merely punish, it transformed, bending reality in subtle ways, teaching that suffering is not merely an event of flesh, but an architect of memory and imagination. Its presence in the chamber, even when empty, seemed to whisper to those who lingered, suggesting that fear, once structured, could become a force as enduring as stone. Legends grew around the rack long after its wheel ceased to turn. Stories of prisoners who spoke of ghostly hands guiding their confessions, of invisible forces that accompanied the stretching of sinew, of visions revealed under the strain of pain, were whispered from cell to cell, from one generation to the next. Some claimed that the rack could pull truth from the very marrow of the bones, that it did not merely stretch flesh, but revealed the secret architecture of the soul itself. In this way, the rack became more than a tool of torture. It was a meditation on fear, a machine that wove the threads of human imagination into a tapestry of terror and revelation. Even now, when the mind wanders through the dim corridors of memory or imagination, one can hear the turning of its wheel. It is a slow, deliberate sound, measured and inevitable, like the heartbeat of the earth itself. Shadows curl in response, and the air seems to thrum with the knowledge that pain, once engineered with intention, leaves traces far beyond the flesh. The rack teaches that cruelty is not merely immediate, not merely physical. It lingers, echoing, in the quiet of a night chamber, in the corners of thought where reason cannot always reach, and in the whispering of legends that refuse to die. As the last torch flickers and the stone walls breathe a quiet sigh, one is left with the lingering question: does the memory of pain become legend? Or does legend shape the memory of pain? Perhaps. In the slow turning of the rack's wheel, the answer is neither simple nor final. Perhaps it is meant only to be felt in the pulse of fear, the stretching of sinew, the expansion of imagination, and the eternal resonance of suffering woven into the very fabric of human history. The rack, with its simple mechanism and unfathomable consequences, remains a testament to human ingenuity turned toward horror. Its lesson is quiet yet insistent. Pain can be measured, shaped, orchestrated, and immortalized. It can extract not only confessions but stories, not only limbs but the fragile edges of reality itself. And in this, the rack is not merely a tool, but a mirror, reflecting back the darkest potentials of invention, imagination, and fear. A relic whose presence lingers in shadowed memory, waiting, always waiting, for those who dare to listen. What silence lies within a coffin of iron? Imagine a shell, hollow and towering, forged with meticulous precision so that every surface within is lined with cruel spikes, each point angled to pierce without releasing life too swiftly. It is the Iron Maiden, an invention that exists at the threshold between history and myth, and it stands as a monument to both human ingenuity and the capacity for horror. Its legend spreads like smoke through the centuries, haunting armories, castles, and museums, whispering of a time when cruelty was as deliberate as art. The setting is 16th century Germany, a land divided into principalities, each ruled by its own law and fear. The cities are narrow, paved with cobblestones that glisten when rain falls, and darkened towers rise like silent sentinels over the marketplace. In the quiet of armories and hidden chambers beneath these imposing structures, the Iron Maiden awaited its victims. Candlelight flickered upon its steel frame, throwing elongated shadows that seemed to breathe and twist. The spikes, polished and merciless, caught the dim glow, reflecting a promise of pain so precise it could almost be considered craftsmanship. Its design was deceptively simple. A door of iron could swing open to admit the condemned. Within, spikes awaited at every angle, positioned to pierce shoulders, chest, and limbs without immediately ending life. Victims placed within were forced to confront the inevitability of death, yet the process was slow, an artful orchestration of torment. Chroniclers from later centuries described the Iron Maiden in hushed tones, noting that some who survived its preliminary encounters would speak of hallucinations, shadows that moved independently of candlelight, whispers that seemed to issue from the metal itself, and the sensation that the spikes bore not only flesh but memory, extracting from the body the residue of fear and guilt alike. Yet the origins of the Iron Maiden are as elusive as the faces of its victims. Some historians contend that its use during the medieval period was largely a myth, a narrative created to terrify, exaggerated in the chronicles of inquisitors and storytellers alike. Others maintain that it was employed in secrecy in dungeons, where the screams of those who entered were muffled by walls of stone and terror. Regardless of its actual historical prevalence, the Iron Maiden endures in legend as a symbol of the meticulous application of cruelty, a device designed not for speed, but for meditation upon suffering. Its form suggests that torment was to be an intimate dialogue between the instrument and the victim, a slow conversation where each spike punctuated the rhythm of fear. Within its hollow chamber, the Iron Maiden becomes almost sentient. Some accounts claim that the device learned with each use, that the placement of its victims over time was adjusted according to the dimensions of the body, the posture of submission, the trembling anticipation of the mind. Witnesses, often scribes or servants, spoke of the air growing heavier, of a faint vibration that could be felt through the soles of one's feet, as though the steel itself pulsed with collected dread. The imagination, already fragile in the shadow of such a device, would often invent sounds and movements where none existed. Yet the legend's power lies precisely in that liminality, in the space between perception and reality, between fear imagined and fear endured. The cultural context only heightens the Iron Maiden's menace. Germany, during the turbulent 16th century, was a mosaic of religious conflict, superstition, and localized power struggles. Faith and law were entwined, and the threat of judgment, both earthly and divine, hung over every town and castle. The Iron Maiden became not merely a tool of punishment, but a talisman of terror, a visible embodiment of absolute authority, designed to impress upon all who beheld it that mercy was fragile, obedience was demanded, and fear could be engineered. Its silent threat conveyed more than torture itself, for in its stillness it demanded contemplation, leaving spectators to imagine the screams that might echo within its walls. And yet, there is an irony that stretches across centuries. The Iron Maiden, though feared as a weapon, also functions as a mirror to human imagination. In the minds of those who never saw it, the device grows more terrible with every retelling. Spikes sharper, chambers taller, and its capacity for horror infinite. In this way, the legend surpasses the historical reality, becoming a meditation on the human psyche, on the way stories of suffering persist, grow, and shape our understanding of fear. In the quiet of a museum or in the solitude of night, one can almost feel its presence, the weight of its iron and the cold patience of its construction pressing against memory. Its slow, deliberate horror teaches a subtle lesson. Cruelty, when rendered with care and precision, becomes timeless. The Iron Maiden did not need to speak. It did not need to move. It only needed to exist, and its mere presence communicated fear more eloquently than any words or screams. Perhaps the spikes do not pierce flesh so much as conscience, leaving behind a residue of dread that survives long after the body has decayed. Legends speak of guards who sensed the pulse in the chamber, of visitors who felt their own breath quicken in proximity to empty steel, as though the maiden remembered, as though it retained a trace of all who had been placed within its iron embrace. When reflecting upon the Iron Maiden, one realizes that its terror lies as much in human perception as in metal. It embodies the fascination and horror of engineering directed toward the body, mind, and soul. Whether or not countless victims ever truly felt its spikes, the Iron Maiden has endured as a symbol, an artifact where cruelty, artistry, and myth converge. The echoes of its legend ripple through time, reminding us that the imagination can forge instruments of fear as potent as any crafted from iron and steel. And so, in the hush of the night, as shadows curl against stone walls and candle flames gutter in the draught, one might imagine the Iron Maiden standing silently, a sentinel of memory and terror. Its spikes do not move, its door remains closed, yet in its silence, it continues to teach, to warn, and to haunt. The lesson is ancient. Fear, meticulously conceived, leaves a mark far beyond the flesh, lingering in thought, in story, and in the whispered legends that refuse to die. In the hush before judgment, there was flame, a fire that licked not merely at wood or tinder, but at the fragile body of the accused across medieval Europe. During centuries, when superstition and fear hung heavy as fog, the blazebok emerged, as both instrument and altar, a device designed to teach lessons in terror and obedience. Its frame of rough-hewn timber seemed almost innocent at first glance, yet when a human body was bound upon it, its purpose revealed itself, a slow, deliberate exposure of flesh to fire, a trial of endurance, a crucible of fear. The year is the 14th century. Streets narrow and winding lead to castle courtyards, where executions were held not as private judgments, but as communal lessons. Villagers and townspeople, priests and soldiers, gathered beneath the gray sky, their breath clouding in the chill morning air, to witness the fearful rituals of justice. The accused, often accused of heresy, witchcraft, or treachery, were bound upon the blazebok, their limbs secured to the wooden frame, the rough timber pressing against their backs and shoulders. Beneath them, fire was kindled, coals glowing a deep orange that seemed almost alive, casting flickering shadows across the cobblestones, the walls, and the faces of those who watched. What made the blazebok particularly terrifying was the deliberate nature of its design. The fire did not consume instantly, it licked and licked, each movement choreographed by those who stoked the flames with patience. Victims were forced to confront the creeping heat, to feel the fire's promise without immediate release. Chroniclers describe how those who endured it for even a short time spoke of visions, faces appearing in the smoke, voices carried on the wind, strange melodies that seemed to emanate from the coals themselves. Some claimed the flames whispered, carrying messages from the divine or the infernal, and that the air around the blazebok grew thick with the scent of both terror and revelation, a perfume woven from ash, flesh, and fear. Yet the blazebok was not simply about punishment. Some records from monastic scribes hint at ritual significance. Fire was seen as a purifier, a medium through which sins could be cleansed, a trial through which the soul might be freed even as the body suffered. There were chants accompanying the igniting of coals, words sung in low, vibrating tones that intertwined with the crackle of flames. Secular accounts, in contrast, emphasize the spectacle, the fear instilled in witnesses, and the authority asserted over both body and mind. In either case, the fire became a mediator between mortality and myth, a bridge where pain, observation, and belief intertwined. The human mind, under such strain, creates stories to survive. Victims of the blazebok often recounted events that may have been hallucination or revelation, shadows that moved independently of torchlight, whispers of guidance from unseen forces. flames forming shapes in the air as if the fire itself were conscious. Chroniclers struggled to capture the experiences, often filling their accounts with metaphor, likening the fire to serpents, divine judgment, or the breath of angels and demons alike. The Blazebach, therefore, existed not just in physical reality, but in the liminal space where fear becomes imagination, and imagination itself becomes a form of captivity. Even for those who survive its embrace, the Blazebach left marks beyond flesh, limbs blistered, skin scarred, muscles contracted into memories of heat and terror, yet the mind, too, carried an imprint. Some claimed to feel the lingering warmth in their dreams, to hear the subtle crackle of coals in silent rooms, or to sense the weight of observation in ordinary shadows. The device transformed experience into story, agony into legend, suffering into a rhythm that would echo across generations. Legends of the Blazebach extended beyond the immediate scene. Tales spread through villages, whispered from hearth to hearth, warning against transgression, rebellion, or heresy. Even centuries later, stories of burning flesh beneath patient coals persisted, embroidered with new details, the original horror magnified by memory and imagination. Some scholars suggest that the Blazebach may have been rare, perhaps used more in imagination than in practice. Yet its image persists as a meditation on the human capacity for both terror and spectacle. The fire itself becomes almost sacred. In these stories, it is both destroyer and teacher, consuming flesh, but revealing truths, or at least, what those in power perceived as truths. There is a rhythm to the blaze, a cadence to the pain, a slow pulse that aligns with human fear and expectation. It is in this rhythm that the Blazebach achieves its deepest resonance, embedding itself into consciousness as both a historical curiosity and a symbolic instrument of human cruelty. And so, in the quiet of evening or in the hush before midnight, one can imagine the Blazebach standing in its courtyard, silent, awaiting a world that no longer delivers flesh to fire. The coals are cold, the wood weathered and gray, yet the memory of it burns as fiercely as any flame. Its lesson endures. Fear can be engineered, pain orchestrated, and imagination enlisted as a companion to terror. The Blazebach teaches that suffering is not only a physical ordeal, but an emotional and spiritual crucible, and that the echoes of agony, whether real or imagined, can stretch across centuries, haunting the spaces between history and legend, until the quiet becomes as heavy as smoke and memory as piercing as flame. What melody can pain compose? Imagine leather and iron, the hiss of lashes slicing through air, and the subtle orchestration of terror that plays upon human flesh. In the courts and prisons of 15th century Spain, the Spanish whip, a multi-tailed scourge tipped with iron, became both instrument and oracle, a tool through which fear and authority were transmitted as clearly as any decree. Its victims were not merely punished, they were transformed into instruments, their bodies vibrating with terror as if every nerve were a string plucked by the hand of some invisible conductor. The era is one of kingdoms torn by rivalry, of cities fortified with stone walls, and of an unyielding devotion to faith that intertwined with law. In the quiet corridors beneath castles or in the shadowed chambers of the Inquisition, the Spanish whip awaited its turn. The very air seemed to thrum with anticipation, heavy with the scent of damp stone and burning torches. Victims were brought forth, their hands shackled, their knees trembling against the cold floor, and the whip's master approached, each movement measured, deliberate, precise. The design of the whip itself was both simple and terrifying. Multiple leather tails, each weighted with iron, could strike simultaneously or in a sequence, creating patterns of pain that danced across flesh. Chroniclers described the effect as almost hypnotic. The lashes landed in rhythm, drawing gasps and cries, bending the body to a cadence of torment. Each blow was calculated, each strike a punctuation in a sentence of suffering written upon the human body. Some victims, straining under the pain, claimed to see sparks, not from the iron, but in the shadows around them, hallucinations born of agony, where the mind sought relief in vision, in fantasy, in escape. Yet the Spanish whip was more than a tool of corporal punishment. Legends suggest certain scourges were imbued with whispered blessings or curses, incantations meant to intensify suffering or draw forth truth. In some accounts, the whip became a medium between executioner and victim, between authority and confession, a language understood only in the tremor of nerves and the rhythm of screams. Its use was as much psychological as physical. Terror did not merely reside in the strike of iron, but in the anticipation, the knowing that every lash could be the one to rend sinew or fracture bone. Witnesses to its application speak of a strange theater of cruelty, the condemned's contorted body, the whip's arc slicing through the dim light, the echo of metal striking flesh upon the stone floors, all formed a grim ballet, a performance, in which pain itself was the lead actor. Chroniclers noted the silence that sometimes preceded the first lash, the held breaths of guards and spectators alike, as if the air itself recognized the gravity of what was about to unfold. In that brief, suspended moment, the whip's menace was more than physical. It was the embodiment of fear made manifest. The human response to such suffering was unpredictable. Some victims cried, some fainted, and some entered a strange state of trance, their minds detaching even as their bodies writhed. Confessions were extracted, loyalty tested, secrets revealed. Yet the whip also left behind an echo far beyond the immediate pain, the memory of fear, the imprint upon both mind and body, the understanding that authority could reach with invisible hands and bend flesh to its will. Legends speak of the whip long after its lashings ended. Soldiers, prisoners, and townsfolk would recount its strikes in hushed tones, embellishing the cruelty, imagining sparks in the air, hearing phantom echoes of cries long past. Even centuries later, the Spanish whip lingers in imagination as a symbol of precise and relentless terror, a testament to how human creativity can serve destruction as readily as construction. Its lesson is subtle, yet profound. Pain can be orchestrated, fear choreographed, and memory enlisted as an accomplice to terror. The Spanish whip teaches that cruelty need not be random or chaotic. To leave a mark, it can be rhythm, it can be pattern, it can be an art form, shaping bodies and minds alike. In imagining its arcs through shadowed halls, one begins to perceive not just the physical torment, but the symphony it composed, a slow, unending music of agony and obedience, of power and submission, carried forward through history like a haunted refrain. And so, in the quiet of midnight, when the mind drifts along corridors of imagination and memory, one can almost hear it, a hiss, a crack, the echo of iron meeting flesh, and the faint, lingering resonance of a song composed entirely of fear. The Spanish whip may no longer strike upon living bodies, yet in the chambers of thought, in the shadowed corners of imagination, its melody endures, a reminder that some instruments are forged not to create beauty, but to etch terror, and that the human heart, delicate and mortal, can remember such music for eternity. What geometry can bend the human form to despair? Imagine a pyramid of wood, pointed and unyielding, poised beneath a body suspended between fear and inevitability. This was the Judas cradle, a device of the late medieval period, whispered of in Spain and beyond, where inquisitors sought not merely confessions, but the surrender of will, the yielding of flesh and spirit alike. Its victims were not merely punished, they were measured, calculated, placed upon the apex of terror with precision that seemed almost divine in its cruelty. The world is the 15th century Iberian Peninsula, a land of kingdoms fractured by war, faith, and suspicion. Cities rose upon stone foundations, fortified against invaders, while the Inquisition moved like a shadow through towns and castles. In the cold silence of dungeons, beneath vaulted ceilings blackened with smoke and mildew, the Judas cradle awaited those accused of heresy, witchcraft, or betrayal. Its pyramid, crafted from oak or harder woods, stood in stark contrast to the warmth of the torchlight that flickered nearby. Chains, ropes, and pulleys were attached to limbs, and the victim was lowered slowly, carefully, so that the apex of the device met flesh with an exacting cruelty. The mechanics were simple, yet horrifying in execution. Gravity became a co-conspirator in pain, drawing body and soul toward the pointed apex. Some chroniclers describe the slow descent as almost meditative, each inch a test of endurance, each moment a negotiation between fear and survival. Victims strained against ropes, legs and arms bound, unable to move freely, every nerve attuned to the sharp intrusion of wood upon body. Hours could pass in the suspended agony, time stretching and folding into itself, so that a single moment felt like an eternity. The Judas cradle did more than punish. It reshaped consciousness. Prisoners reported visions that seemed to emerge from the very structure of the dungeon, shadows twisting into faces, whispers emanating from stones, lights that shimmered without flame. Some spoke of voices offering advice, warning, or accusation, as though the device itself had become a mediator between life and judgment. The mind, seeking escape from the relentless intrusion of pain, drifted into corridors of imagination and hallucination, producing stories that would later haunt chroniclers' quills. The paradox of the Judas cradle lies in its precision. Unlike chaotic implements of pain, its geometry demanded patience and calculation. The torturer was both artist and scientist, calibrating pressure and descent with care. Pain was distributed deliberately, yet without haste, allowing the victim's mind to wander into terror, confession, or hallucination. Chroniclers noted that confessions extracted on the cradle often bore the marks of imagination as much as truth, accusations of invisible conspiracies, supernatural visitations, or hidden crimes that had never occurred. The device shaped not only bodies, but stories, bending memory as expertly as it bent sinew. Even the architecture of the dungeon contributed to the horror. Low, arched ceilings, thick stone walls, and narrow corridors amplified every creak of wood, every groan of flesh, and the subtle whispers of those who had come before. The air was heavy with the scent of damp stone, sweat, and fear, and torches cast shadows that seemed to move independently of flame. It was a theater in which the audience was both witness and participant, the drama unfolding on the stage of human endurance. Legends of the Judas cradle spread far beyond the castles that housed it. Stories passed through villages, whispered around fires, embroidered by imagination and horror. Some historians argue it was more legend than widespread reality, yet the fear it inspired is indisputable. Even today, the image of a human body suspended above a sharp apex, every nerve alert, every muscle taut, speaks to the universal dread of being powerless, of being placed precisely at the mercy of forces beyond one's control. There's an almost philosophical terror in the device's simplicity. It does not crush outright. It does not strike in haste. It measures, calculates, and waits. In this, the Judas cradle becomes a meditation on human ingenuity applied to suffering, a lesson in the quiet power of anticipation, and a mirror to the mind's own ability to amplify fear. Its victims were not only bent against wood, but bent against time and reality itself, suspended between anticipation and fulfillment, imagination and truth. And so, in the silence of centuries, the Judas cradle persists, not in wood or stone, which has long decayed, but in the imagination, the whispered stories, and the quiet understanding that some instruments of cruelty are less about brute force and more about the patience to make the mind itself a chamber of terror. Its geometry endures, a reminder that fear can be calculated, torment can be measured, and the human spirit, though resilient, is delicate in the balance between flesh and shadow. What restraint can speak louder than the cries of flesh? Imagine a device no larger than a child's cradle, yet capable of bending the human body and soul to its design. It was known as the heretic's fork, a simple yet terrifying instrument of medieval inquisition. Fashioned from iron and steel, its cruel geometry enforcing obedience through the quiet terror of immobility. Suspended between jaw and chest, it pressed unyieldingly upon flesh and bone, ensuring that the slightest movement became agony, that every breath, every swallow, was a reminder of captivity. The scene is 15th century Europe, a landscape of kingdoms. Fractured by rivalry, faith, and suspicion, stone towers rise over market squares, the walls of cathedrals glinting faintly in sunlight, while in shadowed chambers beneath these edifices, inquisitors carried out their work with patient cruelty. Within these dungeons, the heretic's fork awaited those accused of heresy, blasphemy, or dissent. Victims were bound, seated or standing, forced into a posture so unnatural that the muscles trembled. With protest, the head pressed forward by the iron prongs, the chin trapped, the throat strained, and the mind compelled into stillness. The instrument's horror lies in its restraint. In the transformation of ordinary motion into impossibility, the victim could not nod, could not speak freely, could not swallow without agony. Each movement became an exercise in fear and calculation, and time itself seemed to slow, stretching minutes into hours of quiet torment. Chroniclers of the Inquisition recount the meticulous precision with which the devices were crafted, small enough to be portable, sharp enough to punish, yet not so deadly as to kill outright. Its aim was endurance, the extraction of confession, the persuasion of obedience, and the quiet imposition of authority. And yet, like all instruments of sustained fear, the heretic's fork did more than merely punish the flesh. In its stillness, it pressed upon the mind, focusing attention inward, magnifying anxiety, and warping perception. Victims often claimed they hear sounds in the silence, whispers of angels or demons, footsteps echoing from distant corridors, the soft creak of iron as if it had a voice of its own. Some spoke of visions, strange apparitions dancing upon the walls, or of memories fractured and rearranged in the tension of immobility. The device transformed quiet into an instrument of psychological torment, amplifying dread with every moment that passed. Its use, though deceptively simple, was profoundly ritualistic. Inquisitors often accompanied its deployment with admonitions, prayers, or threats. Intertwining faith and fear, the victim's stillness became a canvas upon which authority inscribed power, and the human mind, isolated in its immobility, began to generate narratives that blurred the lines between memory, imagination, and hallucination. Confessions obtained were rarely clear-cut. They were often woven from fear, suggestion, and the mind's desperate attempt to make sense of suffering. Legends persist of the heretic's fork long after the dungeons fell silent. Stories circulated of monks and guards who swore that the device seemed to hum when a victim's body trembled. The iron itself bore witness to anguish, recorded in quiet its tale of obedience and terror. Its simplicity belied a sophistication of cruelty. It required no fire, no blade, no spectacle, only restraint, and yet, restraint itself became an instrument of profound terror. It is in this quiet horror that the heretic's fork achieves its haunting resonance, a lesson in how stillness and silence, when wielded with intention, can inflict suffering as profound as any scream. Even today, in the imagination, its effect endures. One can almost feel the subtle pressure, the impossibility of motion, the slow, relentless shaping of thought by constraint. It is a device that teaches patience, both to the torturer and to the historian who seeks to comprehend it. The heretic's fork reminds us that cruelty does not always roar. Sometimes it whispers, presses, and tightens, embedding itself into memory with a quiet insistence that survives centuries. In reflecting upon it, one realizes that some of the most enduring instruments of human fear are those that shape perception. As much as flesh, the heretic's fork, with its slender prongs and deliberate intent, endures not merely as iron, but as symbol of control, of anticipation, and of the mind's capacity to endure, imagine, and remember. In the hush before midnight, when shadows curl along stone walls and candlelight trembles, one can almost sense its presence, an iron whisper pressing against the edge of thought, a quiet testament to the fact that the most subtle cruelty often leaves the deepest scars. What punishment can silence impose that words cannot? Imagine a mask of iron, forged to restrain, to humiliate, to control. It was called the scold's bridle, a device designed not to strike, but to suppress, to transform voice into restraint, speech into submission. Across the streets and dungeons of medieval Europe, it became the terror of women accused of gossip, insubordination, or defiance, a cruel instrument that held not only jaw and tongue, but reputation, dignity, and the fragile sense of self. The world is the 16th century towns and villages of England, where superstition and authority intertwined. Cobblestone streets wound beneath timbered houses, and marketplaces thrummed with the chatter of daily life. Within that same world of ordinary bustle, the scold's bridle lurked as a quiet enforcer, crafted of iron. Fitted precisely to bite and pinch, it enclosed the head, sometimes with a spiked gag that pressed into the tongue, ensuring that even the slightest word could bring unbearable pain. The wearer's eyes might remain wide, their expression of horror and shame framed within the cruel contours of steel. Its simplicity belied its potency, unlike whips, racks, or fire. The bridle did not rely on spectacle or dramatic pain. Its power lay in the relentless, intimate pressure it exerted upon the body and mind. Every breath, every swallow, every attempted word became an exercise in suffering. Chroniclers describe women forced to endure hours, even days, in its embrace, their speech reduced to silence, their thoughts pressed inward by the constant reminder of iron upon tongue and skull. It was a punishment designed to shape character, through constraint, to enforce obedience not through immediate agony, but through prolonged, unyielding humiliation. Yet the device was more than a punishment of the flesh. It was an architecture of social fear. Women subjected to the scold's bridle were paraded through streets, displayed before neighbors, family, and friends. Their silence became a spectacle, a lesson in the power of authority, and a warning to all who might speak freely or defy societal expectations. In some villages, it was said that the bridle could read the mind of the wearer, translating defiance into discomfort, transforming imagined transgression into immediate pain. Those who witnessed its use often shivered in silence, as the device's terror extended beyond its wearer, instilling collective dread in the community itself. The mental toll was as profound as the physical. Victims spoke of hallucinations, in the darkness, of hearing voices where none existed, of imagining the clamor of accusation echoing even after the bridle was removed. Some chroniclers recorded the quiet despair of women who, having endured its pressure, found that speech itself had become an act of fear, and that even after release, the memory of silence haunted thought, bending imagination into caution, hesitation, and obedience. Despite its prominence in public memory, historians debate the extent of its use. Some suggest that the scold's bridle was rare, more symbolic than routine, yet the image persists. A woman bound, gagged, eyes wide, tongue constrained, walking through the marketplace under the weight of iron and shame. Its endurance lies not only in fact, but in imagination. It embodies a unique cruelty that operates quietly, intimately, and socially, whereas other devices rely on spectacle, noise, or fire. The bridle's horror is subtle, psychological, and collective, teaching that terror could be imposed even without the lash, the spike, or the flame. Even now, the scold's bridle resonates as a meditation on control, language, and power. It reminds us that human cruelty need not be dramatic to endure. It can exist in silence, in pressure, in restraint, and in the transformation of speech. In a pain, its legacy persists in stories, illustrations, and the whispered imagination of those who contemplate what it means to have one's voice taken, not by death, but by steel. And so, in the stillness of night, when shadows curl along stone walls and candlelight trembles, one can imagine the bridle's iron frame, empty yet present, as if waiting for words that will never come. Its lesson is chilling and enduring. Some punishments are not only physical, but existential. The scold's bridle did not merely silence the tongue. It imposed a language of fear, a dialect of submission, and a vocabulary of shame that echoes through time, reminding us that the most insidious cruelty is often that which restrains not life, but the voice of living itself. What horror can be, concealed within a slender cylinder of metal. Imagine a device, small enough to be held in one hand, yet capable of delivering unspeakable torment. It was called the Pair of Anguish, whispered of in the annals of medieval Europe, a tool that transformed silence into agony, curiosity into dread. Its form was deceptively simple, a pear-shaped device of iron, bronze, or steel, fitted with expanded segments that could stretch, tear, and unmake, all with the turn of a hidden screw. The imagination recoils at its function, yet history whispers that such instruments were real, used in secret chambers to punish thieves, blasphemers, and women accused of sin. The setting is 16th century France and Germany, regions rife with superstition, local justice, and clandestine inquisitions. In small towns, behind the doors of shadowed dungeons, the Pair of Anguish awaited its victims. Candlelight flickered across damp walls, illuminating the metallic instrument, cold and gleaming, its contours innocent enough to deceive, yet prepared to deliver pain that was intimate and precise. The accused were bound and told nothing of the device's inner mechanics. Their understanding of the coming torment limited to the fear that had already taken root in the heart. Its operation was subtle and methodical, inserted with grim care into orifices, mouth, rectum, or vagina. The device's segments expanded slowly with a hidden screw, stretching flesh beyond endurance. Tearing and contorting with precision, victims were often left alone with their terror, the quiet of the chamber amplifying every pulse, every tremor, every gasp. Chroniclers report that some who survived, mind, isolated in its immobility, began to generate narratives that blurred the lines between memory, imagination, and hallucination. Confessions obtained were rarely clear-cut. They were often woven from fear, suggestion, and the mind's desperate attempt to make sense of suffering. Legends persisted that heretics fork long after the dungeons fell silent. Stories circulated of monks and guards who swore that the device seemed to hum when a victim's body trembled. The iron itself bore witness to anguish, recorded in quiet its tale of obedience and terror. Its simplicity belied a sophistication of cruelty. It required no fire, no blade, no spectacle, only restraint, and yet, restraint itself became an instrument of profound terror. It is in this quiet horror that the heretic's fork achieves its haunting resonance, a lesson in how stillness and silence, when wielded with intention, can inflict suffering as profound as any scream. Even today, In the imagination, its effect endures. One can almost feel the subtle pressure, the impossibility of motion, the slow, relentless shaping of thought by constraint. It is a device that teaches patience, both to the torturer and to the historian who seeks to comprehend it. The heretic's fork reminds us that cruelty does not always roar. Sometimes it whispers, presses, and tightens, embedding itself into memory with a quiet insistence that survives centuries. In reflecting upon it, one realizes that some of the most enduring instruments of human fear are those that shape perception. As much as flesh, the heretic's fork, with its slender prongs and deliberate intent, endures not merely as iron, but as symbol of control, of anticipation, and of the mind's capacity to endure, imagine, and remember. In the hush before midnight, when shadows curl along stone walls and candlelight trembles, one can almost sense its presence, an iron whisper pressing against the edge of thought, a quiet testament to the fact that the most subtle cruelty often leaves the deepest scars. What punishment can silence impose that words cannot? Imagine a mask of iron, forged to restrain, to humiliate, to control. It was called the scold's bridle, a device designed not to strike, but to suppress, to transform voice into restraint, speech into submission. Across the streets and dungeons of medieval Europe, it became the terror of women accused of gossip, insubordination, or defiance, a cruel instrument that held not only jaw and tongue, but reputation, dignity, and the fragile sense of self. The world is the 16th century towns and villages of England, where superstition and authority intertwine. Cobblestone streets wound beneath timbered houses, and marketplaces thrummed with the chatter of daily life. Within that same world of ordinary bustle, the scold's bridle lurked as a quiet enforcer, crafted of iron. Fitted precisely to bite and pinch, it enclosed the head, sometimes with a spiked gag that pressed into the tongue, ensuring that even the slightest word could bring unbearable pain. The wearer's eyes might remain wide, their expression of horror and shame framed within the cruel contours of steel. Its simplicity belied its potency, unlike whips, racks, or fire. The bridle did not rely on spectacle or dramatic pain. Its power lay in the relentless, intimate pressure it exerted upon the body and mind. Every breath, every swallow, every attempted word became an exercise in suffering. Chroniclers describe women forced to endure hours, even days, in its embrace, their speech reduced to silence, their thoughts pressed inward by the constant reminder of iron upon tongue and skull. It was a punishment designed to shape character, through constraint, to enforce obedience not through immediate agony, but through prolonged, unyielding humiliation. Yet the device was more than a punishment of the flesh. It was an architecture of social fear. Women subjected to the scold's bridle were paraded through streets, displayed before neighbors, family, and friends. Their silence became a spectacle, a lesson in the power of authority, and a warning to all who might speak freely or defy societal expectations. In some villages, it was said that the bridle could read the mind of the wearer, translating defiance into discomfort, transforming imagined transgression into immediate pain. Those who witnessed its use often shivered in silence, as the device's terror extended beyond its wearer, instilling collective dread in the community itself. The mental toll was as profound as the physical. Victims spoke of hallucinations, in the darkness, of hearing voices where none existed, of imagining the clamor of accusation echoing even after the bridle was removed. Some chroniclers recorded the quiet despair of women who, having endured its pressure, found that speech itself had become an act of fear, and that even after release, the memory of silence haunted thought, bending imagination into caution, hesitation, and obedience. Despite its prominence in public memory, historians debate the extent of its use. Some suggest that the scold's bridle was rare, more symbolic than routine, yet the image persists. A woman bound, gagged, eyes wide, tongue constrained, walking through the marketplace under the weight of iron and shame. Its endurance lies not only in fact, but in imagination. It embodies a unique cruelty that operates quietly, intimately, and socially, whereas other devices rely on spectacle, noise, or fire. The bridle's horror is subtle, psychological, and collective, teaching that terror could be imposed even without the lash, the spike, or the flame. Even now, the scold's bridle resonates as a meditation on control, language, and power. It reminds us that human cruelty need not be dramatic to endure. It can exist in silence, in pressure, in restraint, and in the transformation of speech into pain, Its legacy persists in stories, illustrations, and the whispered imagination of those who contemplate what it means to have one's voice taken, not by death, but by steel. And so, in the stillness of night, when shadows curl along stone walls and candlelight trembles, one can imagine the bridal's iron frame, empty yet present, as if waiting for words that will never come. Its lesson is chilling and enduring. Some punishments are not only physical, but existential. The scold's bridle did not merely silence the tongue. It imposed a language of fear, a dialect of submission, and a vocabulary of shame that echoes through time, reminding us that the most insidious cruelty is often that which restrains not life, but the voice of living itself. What horror can be, concealed within a slender cylinder of metal. Imagine a device, small enough to be held in one hand, yet capable of delivering unspeakable torment. It was called the Pear of Anguish, whispered of in the annals of medieval Europe, a tool that transformed silence into agony, curiosity into dread. Its form was deceptively simple, a pear-shaped device of iron, bronze, or steel, fitted with expanded segments that could stretch, tear, and unmake, all with a turn of a hidden screw. The imagination recoils at its function, yet history whispers that such instruments were real, used in secret chambers to punish thieves, blasphemers, and women accused of sin. The setting is 16th century France and Germany, regions rife with superstition, local justice, and clandestine inquisitions. In small towns, behind the doors of shadowed dungeons, the Pear of Anguish awaited its victims. Candlelight flickered across damp walls, illuminating the metallic instrument, cold and gleaming, its contours innocent enough to deceive, yet prepared to deliver pain that was intimate and precise. The accused were bound and told nothing of the device's inner mechanics. Their understanding of the coming torment limited to the fear that had already taken root in the heart. Its operation was subtle and methodical, inserted with grim care into orifices, mouth, rectum, or vagina. The device's segments expanded slowly with a hidden screw, stretching flesh beyond endurance. Tearing and contorting with precision, victims were often left alone with their terror, the quiet of the chamber amplifying every pulse, every tremor, every gasp. Chroniclers report that some who survived described hearing a soft, almost musical whining as the device turned, the metal groaning under its own pressure, echoing in the dungeon like a symphony of pain. And yet, the Pear of Anguish is as much legend as history, shrouded in ambiguity. Some accounts suggest its widespread use, others hint that its horrors were imagined, exaggerated by fear and the fascination of later chroniclers. But whether real or myth, the terror it inspired is undeniable. The device becomes more than physical, it is psychological, a tool of anticipation, a teacher of fear, as the mind alone begins to conjure suffering in advance. The victim's imagination does much of the work, the whisper of metal turning, the slow, precise expansion, the inevitability of pain that cannot be escaped. Its presence transforms space into theater. Stone walls echo the unspoken terror. Torchlight dances across the device's polished surface, and the air itself seems to hum with expectation. Observers, if any were present, are described as frozen, silent, caught in the interplay between human curiosity and human cruelty. The Pear does not scream. It is designed to make the human body speak in a language of agony, to render the flesh a map of punishment and the mind a witness to its own helplessness. Some stories hint at ritualistic overtones, that the Pear was used to extract confessions, to punish sin, to enforce moral authority. Others suggest it was an instrument of pure terror, an invention whose intent was to teach obedience through intimate horror rather than spectacle. Victims' accounts, if believed, are filled with visions of twisted light, the feeling of fire without flame, and the sensation of the metal itself observing, waiting, measuring, and condemning. Even in absence, the Pear of Anguish haunts imagination. It's small, precise. Deliberate design reminds us that cruelty does not require grandeur. It thrives in subtlety, in silence, in the slow manipulation of body and mind. It teaches that terror can be intimate, engineered with precision, and linger long after the device has been removed. Its legend persists because fear, once imagined, becomes immortal, and the mind retains the echoes of what might have been endured. In the quiet of night, when shadows lengthen along stone floors and candlelight flickers uncertainly, one can almost sense the device waiting, unseen yet present. Its lesson endures. The most insidious instruments of suffering are those that inhabit the small spaces of flesh, thought, and anticipation. The Pear of Anguish may be silent, But its voice, the screams it evokes in memory, imagination, and legend, is eternal, a whispering testament to human cruelty, ingenuity, and the fragile boundaries of endurance. What terror can be wrought when the human body is turned into an instrument of spectacle? Imagine a wheel, massive and unyielding, resting upon cobblestones glistening with rain, ready to transform flesh and bone into a public testament of power and fear. This was the breaking wheel, a device of both punishment and theater, known across medieval Europe as the instrument of final judgment, where agony became a performance, and the rhythm of suffering dictated the lesson to all who watched. The year is the 14th century, and the streets of towns and villages echo with the rhythm of commerce, worship, and the hum of human life. Above this ordinary world, scaffoldings rise and town squares open to the sky, waiting for the arrival of the condemned. The breaking wheel, a massive wooden structure reinforced with iron bands, waits silently, almost reverent, as if it understands the gravity of its role. Crowds gather, a murmur of anticipation threading through the chill morning air. There, breaths mingling with the scent of damp stone, smoke from nearby fires, and the faint tang of blood from earlier punishments. The condemned is brought forth, their limbs bound, eyes wide with dread, and placed upon the wheel. Executioners move with deliberate care, arranging limbs along its spokes, each angle chosen to maximize pain while prolonging survival. Blows fall upon bones with the measured precision of an orchestra, cracking, splintering, twisting. As the wheel turns, elevating agony to ritual, each strike produces a symphony of fracture, the brittle snap of humerus, tibia, and femur echoing against stone walls, amplified by the collective gasp of the audience. Time stretches, folds, and bends. A single hour on the wheel feels like an eternity. The body transformed into a canvas upon which suffering is inscribed. Yet the breaking wheel was not merely about destruction of flesh. It was a narrative device, a method to impress upon all observers the consequences of transgression. Chroniclers describe victims crying not only for themselves, but for the injustice of the world. Their agony framed by torches casting long, flickering shadows across the crowd. Executioners, acting as both agents and narrators, choreographed the pain, turning punishment into a lesson, fear into spectacle. It was theater, brutal and uncompromising, yet steeped in logic and ritual. Legends tell of the psychological toll as well. Victims, often conscious for hours, reported visions, shadows that seemed to move independently, whispers that wove through the crowd, and the sensation that the wheel itself bore witness. Absorbing agony and fear alike, some confessed to sins never committed, their minds contorted by anticipation and pain, revealing the subtle interplay between mind, body, and instrument. The wheel became more than wood and iron. It became a vessel of authority, a collector of terror, a silent teacher of obedience. Its impact extended far beyond the scaffold. Villagers carried the memory of the spectacle in whispers and stories, warning children and neighbors, spreading dread across counties and decades. Even those who never saw the wheel firsthand internalized its lesson, imagining the cracking of bone and the slow, methodical turning of flesh. Over centuries, it became emblematic of both cruelty and control, a reminder that the human body, while resilient, can also be manipulated into narrative, performance, and obedience, even today. In imagination, the breaking wheel endures as a meditation on the fragility of the body and the sophistication of cruelty. It demonstrates that punishment need not be swift to be effective. It can be prolonged, deliberate, and imbued with ritual. Each turn of the wheel is a lesson not merely in obedience, but in human endurance. The intersection of fear, anticipation, and observation in the hush of night. When the mind drifts through corridors of memory and imagination, one can almost hear the wheel turning, the snap of bone, the low hum of collective breath held in suspense. It stands as a silent testament to the human fascination with control, suffering, and spectacle. A reminder that some instruments of horror endure not merely in wood and iron, but in the echoing corridors of imagination, memory, and whispered legend. The breaking wheel teaches that cruelty, when ritualized and deliberate, becomes timeless, a dark cadence that resonates far beyond the lives it consumed. What terror can silence impose when death comes not in flames or steel, but in the intimate constriction of breath? The garrote, a device of medieval Europe, embodies this quiet horror. It was a simple instrument, deceptively minimal, a collar of iron, a cord, or a band, tightened slowly around the neck, its victim forced into stillness, into helpless anticipation. while life ebbed away in measured increments. Unlike the spectacle of fire or the violent arc of the whip, the garrote demanded patience, precision, and an almost reverent cruelty from those who wielded it. The setting is 15th century Spain, where kingdoms were fractured by political intrigue and the Inquisition moved silently through towns and castles. Streets were narrow, paved with stones worn smooth by the tread of countless feet, and shadows fell long and jagged as the sun dipped behind towers and cathedrals. In hidden chambers, beneath the gaze of authorities both secular and sacred, the garrote awaited. Candlelight flickered on iron collars, coiled cords, and wooden posts, illuminating the stillness with an almost sacred attention. As if every inch of the device was consecrated to the act of judgment, its use was deliberate. The condemned were bound, seated or kneeling, and the device was adjusted with care. A collar pressed against flesh, a cord looped and tightened by the hands of the executioner. Each turn, each pull, drew the body closer to the inevitable, stretching consciousness across the thin line between life and death. Breath became precious. Each inhale of victory, each exhale of surrender. Victims often reported that the mind, starved of oxygen, wandered into visions, flickers of memory, hallucinations of light, or whispers of voices that were neither human nor divine, but somewhere in between, echoing the subtle rhythm of constriction. The horror of the garrote was both physical and psychological. Unlike devices that mutilated or scorched, it confined, controlled, and observed. Its presence instilled terror even before it was applied. Communities whispered its threat, and the accused knew that once bound, there would be no sound, no escape, only the slow surrender to an unyielding embrace of iron or cord. Chroniclers note that some executioners took pride in their precision, adjusting the device so that the victim's struggle would last minutes or, in some accounts, hours, extending the experience of fear while maintaining the inevitability of death. Yet the garrote's terror was not merely in anticipation or suffocation. In some accounts, its use was ritualized, prayers whispered over the bound, the victim's head bowed in enforced reverence, hands tied as if in meditation. Death became a quiet ceremony, the executioner a conductor of finality, and the room itself transformed into a chamber where stillness and mortality intertwined. The subtle hum of tightened ropes, the metallic sheen of iron, and the faint hiss of the constricting cord created a rhythm that haunted observers, imprinting the inevitability of consequence into collective memory. Its effect extended beyond the victim. Those who witnessed the garrote, whether guards, townspeople, or inquisitors, carried its lesson long after the act. The quietness of its application, the lack of spectacle, paradoxically magnified the horror. Where fire or spikes announced suffering with cries and smoke, the garrote demanded reflection. It whispered of control, inevitability, and the fragility of life itself over centuries. Its image endured, inspiring both fear and fascination. As scholars, chroniclers, and storytellers recounted the precision, patience, and intimacy of its cruelty, the garrote also illuminates a subtle truth about human ingenuity applied to punishment. The most effective instruments often work quietly, shaping perception as much as the body. The victim's mind becomes a theater for terror, imagining horrors beyond the immediate sensation, while the executioner orchestrates each breath, each tightening, as if conducting a symphony of finality. In this, the garrote transcends simple cruelty. It becomes a meditation on mortality, the intimate fragility of human life, and the capacity for fear to be imposed with measured subtlety. In imagining the garrote today, in the hush of night, or in the quiet of history's shadowed corridors, one can almost sense its presence, the cold embrace of iron, the tension of cord against flesh, and the final, measured surrender of life. Its lesson is both chilling and enduring. Terror does not always need spectacle. Sometimes it resides in restraint, in patience, in the quiet tightening of inevitability. The garrote teaches that the boundary between life and death can be as delicate as a thread, and that human fear, once carefully guided, endures far beyond the moment of suffering. Even now, the garrote remains more than a tool. It is a symbol of silent authority, of the human mind's vulnerability to restraint, and of the haunting capacity of slow, deliberate terror, in shadowed imagination, in whispered legend, in the quiet spaces between thought and memory. It waits, patient, inevitable, and eternally present. What sound can pain produce when it becomes a language of its own? Imagine a device designed not merely to extract confession, but to turn the human body into a conduit of revelation. It was known in whispered chronicles as the rack of tongues, an instrument feared across 15th century Europe, where inquisitors and magistrates sought truths that the mind might conceal, but the body could not. Unlike other implements of torment, this device focused not only on flesh, but on the delicate organ of speech, the tongue, that bridge between thought and utterance. The setting is a shadowed dungeon beneath a Gothic castle, walls blackened with smoke and damp, floors slick with the residue of countless punishments, torches flare in iron sconces, throwing flickering light across the pale, trembling faces of the condemned. The rack of tongues, a wooden and iron apparatus, stands ready, straps, cords, and levers are arranged with meticulous care, their design precise and unforgiving. A victim is bound, jaw forced open, tongue secured to iron ore, leather restraints pulled taut with a slow, deliberate pressure that stretches the delicate organ and distorts speech. Each adjustment becomes a measured negotiation of agony and endurance. Its terror lies in subtlety. The victim cannot speak freely. Each attempt to utter words produces pain. Confession, demand, or protest is met not with steel, fire, or flame, but with the exquisite cruelty of slow elongation and pressure. Chroniclers of the Inquisition describe a scene both clinical and nightmarish. The victim's eyes wide with pain, saliva mingling with fear, each nerve attuned to the precise degree of stretch, while executioners operate with an almost reverential patience. Time stretches as the mind becomes consumed by anticipation, the tongue becoming a landscape of suffering, the body a map of its limits. Yet the rack of tongues was more than physical punishment. It became a vessel of psychological terror. Victims often described hallucinations, whispers that seemed to emanate from the iron itself, shadows forming letters upon the walls, or imagined voices speaking truths too terrible to acknowledge. Confessions extracted under its influence were rarely simple. They blended reality with hallucination, fear with imagination, truth with invention. The mind, starved of comfort and guided by relentless pressure, became both canvas and medium, producing revelations that might otherwise remain hidden. The device also transformed the space around it. The dungeon, already oppressive, became a chamber of anticipation and dread. The flicker of torchlight, the subtle creak of levers, and the low murmur of onlookers created a rhythm that amplified the victim's terror. Observers often shivered in silence, knowing that the agony before them was deliberate, calculated, and inexorably precise. In this quiet orchestration, pain became both message and medium, fear a language understood by all present, and the tongue itself a reluctant narrator. Legends of the rack of tongues extend beyond the dungeon walls. Villagers, scholars, and scribes spoke in hushed tones of the instrument, recounting the strange confessions it elicited, the whispers and visions that accompanied its use, and the haunting precision of its design. Some argue it may have been rare, even exceptional, yet its reputation endures because it exemplifies a form of cruelty that is both intimate and cerebral, affecting mind and body in equal measure. Its terror lies not in spectacle, but in anticipation, precision, and the intimate violation of speech itself. Even now, the rack of tongues resonates in imagination. One can almost feel the slow pull, the impossibility of speech, the mind bending under pressure, conjuring hallucinations, visions, and confessions of both real and imagined transgressions. It teaches that fear can be engineered with extraordinary subtlety, that pain can be both physical and psychological, and that instruments of suffering can operate not by spectacle alone, but through precision, patience, and intimacy. In the quiet of night, when the mind wanders through corridors of memory and imagination, the rack of tongues endures. Its wooden frame and iron levers may have long decayed, but the echoes of its influence, the terror it imposed, the confessions it drew, the voices it shaped, remain. It is a reminder that some instruments of cruelty are designed not merely to punish, but to transform, to bend the mind and body into a language of submission, confession, and fear. The rack of tongues whispers across centuries, a testament to the ingenuity of human terror and the fragility of the human body and spirit under deliberate, methodical cruelty. What stillness can speak louder than 1,000 screams? Imagine a chair, simple in appearance yet devastating in purpose, a seat of judgment that transforms wood and iron into instruments of agony. Known in whispered chronicles as the chair of torture, it awaited in shadowed dungeons and council chambers, ready to bend the human body, crush the spirit, and render even the bravest soul mute with suffering. Unlike flames or spikes, its horror lay in calculated restraint, a slow, deliberate compression of flesh and bone that demanded endurance and obedience. The world is 14th century Europe, a time when superstition and authority were inseparable, and when punishment was not merely retribution, but spectacle, lesson, and warning. In the stone-walled dungeons beneath castles and town halls, the chair waited in silence. Illuminated by the flicker of a single torch, the air was thick with the scent of damp stone, iron, and fear, carrying whispers from prior victims and the subtle hum of anticipation. Each plank, each iron strap, each spike was positioned with precision, promising agony without immediacy, a measured, intimate form of terror. Its design was deceptively simple yet profoundly cruel. The chair seat, back, and armrests were embedded with spikes, strategically placed to pierce flesh when pressure was applied. Victims were bound to its frame, their bodies forced against unyielding metal, every movement becoming an exercise in pain. The chair could immobilize, compress, and extend suffering, rendering even small gestures unbearable. Chroniclers recount that some victims could remain conscious for hours, writhing against the spikes, their faces pale, eyes wide, every nerve alert to the cold, cruel embrace of wood and iron. Yet the chair of torture was more than an instrument, a physical torment. Its horror was amplified by psychology, anticipation, restraint, and the subtle theater of fear. The mind of the bound became a stage for shadows, whispers, and imagined threats. Some reported seeing figures in the flickering torchlight, hearing murmurs of judgment in the stones themselves, or imagining the voices of angels and demons interwoven in their agony. Confessions extracted upon the chair often reflected not truth alone, but a distorted mirror of fear, imagination, and suggestion, revealing the profound interplay between body and mind under constraint. The device was also a tool of ritual. Executioners, inquisitors, or magistrates approached with solemnity, adjusting straps, tightening belts, or shifting the bound with precision. The chair demanded patience, exactitude, and an almost ceremonial attention, transforming suffering into a lesson. Those who witnessed its use often reported a strange hush, the weight of silence magnified by anticipation, a collective awareness that the human body could be so thoroughly measured and manipulated. Legends persist of the chair of torture beyond the walls of the dungeons. Stories circulated in villages, in market squares, and in whispered warnings to the young and disobedient. Its design, cruel yet meticulous, symbolized authority, control, and the subtle capacity of human ingenuity to inflict suffering. Some historians question the chair's prevalence, yet its reputation endures, perhaps because it demonstrates that cruelty does not require spectacle, flames, or blood, only precision, patience, and a knowledge of the human body's limits. Even now, in imagination, one can sense its presence, the cold wood against skin, the sharp kiss of iron spikes, the impossibility of motion, and the mind consumed by the anticipation of agony. The chair of torture teaches that terror can be engineered not with immediacy, but with restraint, that suffering can be prolonged and measured, and that human fear can be sculpted with careful patience. Its lesson is chilling yet timeless, that silence, when imposed with intention, can resonate louder than any scream, and that some instruments of cruelty endure not in their physical form, but in the haunting corridors of memory, legend, and imagination. In the hush of midnight, when shadows curl along stone walls and candlelight quivers, the chair waits in the mind's eye, patient, silent, inevitable, a testament to the human capacity for both cruelty and endurance, and a reminder that some instruments of suffering achieve immortality not through fire or blood, but through the quiet, unrelenting mastery of pain itself. What subtle cruelty can masquerade as mercy? Imagine a hand-shaped device, small and unassuming, yet capable of twisting flesh, breaking bones, and unraveling resolve. This was the cat's paw, a lesser-known instrument of medieval Europe, whispered about in the chronicles of inquisitors and executioners alike. Its design was deceptively delicate, a clawed hand of iron or bronze, applied to fingers, toes, or limbs to inflict pain with precise, methodical pressure. Unlike the dramatic fury of fire or the abrupt snap of a wheel, the cat's paw worked quietly, intimately, extracting compliance through prolonged discomfort and terror. The scene is the late 15th century in the shadowed corners of German and French dungeons. Stone corridors, narrow and damp, carry the echoes of distant footsteps and the muffled whispers of prior victims. Torches, placed at intervals, flicker upon iron bars and wooden doors, illuminating the cat's paw as it rests on a wooden table, gleaming faintly in anticipation. The air is thick with the scent of smoke, sweat, and fear charged with the collective. Anxiety about the condemned and the guards who know the device's reputation. Its use was methodical and precise. Fingers or toes were placed between the clawed tines, which could then be tightened to exert relentless pressure. Every adjustment was deliberate, measured to prolong pain without immediately fracturing bone. Though in many cases, small fractures would form over time. Victims reported sensations that seemed to radiate through the body, a dull ache that sharpened into exquisite torment, a vibration of nerve endings amplified by anticipation and helplessness. Chroniclers described the quiet agony, the suppressed whimpers, and the profound dread that accompanied the knowledge that the device's cruelty was controlled entirely by another's hands. The cat's paw, like many medieval devices, was not merely about physical punishment. It was psychological. Anticipation became a companion to pain. The mind, isolated and focused on the inevitable, began to imagine horrors beyond the immediate sensation, imagine fractures, imagine screams, imagine confessions that might be demanded next. Some victims confessed to acts they had never committed, their words shaped by fear and by the subtle coercion of the clawed mechanism. The device became a teacher of obedience, a sculptor of the mind's response to inevitable suffering. Its lessons recorded not only in flesh, but in whispered chronicles. The setting of its use also amplified its terror. Dungeons were designed to heighten anticipation, narrow corridors magnifying sound, torchlight casting erratic shadows, the AMP stone echoing even the softest movements. The cat's paw operated within this theater, quiet in execution, but monumental in effect. Executioners, often silent and deliberate, approached with ritualized precision, adjusting the device, observing the reactions of the bound, and allowing each moment of pain to resonate fully. Its subtlety belied a profound understanding of human physiology and psychology, turning a small instrument into an agent of immense power. Legends of the cat's paw persist, partly because of its intimate and insidious nature. Unlike larger implements that demanded public spectacle, this device operated in secrecy, magnifying fear through isolation. It is remembered not only for the pain it inflicted, but for the stories it inspired, whispers of invisible claws, of hands that seemed to read the body's limits, of instruments that were patient, precise, and inexorably cruel. The device teaches that even the smallest tool, when wielded with understanding and deliberation, can leave indelible marks upon body and mind. Even now, in imagination, the cat's paw endures. One can almost feel the delicate, iron tines pressing. In the flesh, the slow, deliberate tightening, the impossibility of escape, and the mind's futile attempt to resist the creeping sensation of terror. Its lesson is chilling and enduring. Cruelty need not be grandiose or spectacular to endure. It can reside in subtlety, patience, and precision. The cat's paw reminds us that human fear can be engineered quietly, intimately, and with sophistication, leaving impressions that persist far longer than the instruments themselves. In the hush of night, when shadows twist across stone walls and candlelight quivers, the device waits in memory, patient, precise, inevitable. It is a testament to the ingenuity of human cruelty, the fragility of flesh, and the extraordinary resilience of the mind under torment. The cat's paw whispers across centuries, a small instrument with a vast legacy, teaching that even the quietest methods of punishment can echo forever in imagination, memory, and legend. What horror arises when confinement becomes a theater of shame? Imagine a cage, small, ironbound, cruelly tailored to the human form, suspended high above the ground or perched in public squares, where the condemned could neither stand fully nor sit with ease. This was a scavenger's cage, a device of medieval punishment whose terror was as much social as it was physical. It transformed the body into spectacle, the human form into an emblem of authority, and the mind into a theater of despair. The scene is the 15th century, in the heart of medieval cities across Europe, Germany, France, and the Low Countries, where justice was both intimate and public, and punishment served as lesson, deterrent, and theater. Streets are narrow, paved with worn cobblestones, and the air is thick with the mingled scents of livestock, smoke, and human life from balconies and windows. Citizens watched as the scavenger's cage was hoisted into place, the condemned enclosed within its iron bars, arms and legs constrained, unable to shield themselves from the gaze of neighbors. The sun glinted off the metal, and shadows danced upon the walls, magnifying the cage's ominous presence. Its cruelty was manifold. The cage was designed to confine tightly, forcing the body into unnatural positions, compressing limbs against cold iron, hunger, thirst, exposure to wind and sun, and the relentless gaze of the public added layers of torment beyond the simple restraint of flesh. Chroniclers describe victims swaying with the swing of the cage, their weight shifting painfully, their bones aching, and their minds unraveling as hours, sometimes days, passed with no relief. The device exacted patience from the body and endurance from the mind, turning waiting into a weapon. Yet the scavenger's cage was not merely a tool of physical suffering. Its design elevated shame into spectacle. Crowds would gather, throwing scraps, shouting insults, or leaving the condemned exposed to the elements and the mockery of passerby. It was a punishment that relied on humiliation as much as on restraint. The mind, constantly aware of exposure and judgment, became complicit in its own torment, generating despair and imagination intertwined. Victims often reported visions of shadows looming larger than life, whispers that seemed to emanate from the very air, and a heightened sensitivity to every movement in the crowd. In this way, the cage transformed fear and shame into a prolonged, intimate ritual. The cage also carried a subtle psychological lesson. It taught communities the reach of authority and the consequences of transgression. It reminded the living that crime, defiance, or disobedience could lead not only to physical suffering, but to prolonged degradation. Chroniclers note that some individuals survived the ordeal only to be haunted for life by the memory of exposure, isolation, and helplessness. The device thus became a teacher, not merely a punishment, but of the fragile boundaries between body, society, and reputation. Legends of the scavenger's cage endured long after the iron rusted and the wooden supports decayed. Tales spoke of cages left empty yet felt present in imagination, of spectators haunted by the echoes of suffering, of shadows that seemed to replay the victim's torment in quiet corridors and candle-lit rooms. The cage's power lay not in spectacle alone, but in anticipation, restraint, and the interplay of exposure and helplessness. Its cruelty was measured, deliberate, and subtle, making it one of the most psychologically potent instruments of medieval punishment. Even now, in imagination, the scavenger's cage persists. One can almost feel the iron pressing against bones, the wind cutting through exposed skin, the suffocating awareness of eyes everywhere, and the mind's endless dance with shame and anticipation. Its lesson is profound and chilling, that cruelty can operate quietly, socially, and psychologically, embedding itself in memory far longer than in flesh. The scavenger's cage teaches that fear, once entwined with shame and isolation, becomes immortal, echoing across centuries as a testament to the enduring power of observation, judgment, and human ingenuity in the art of torment. In the hush of night, when shadows twist along ancient walls and candlelight trembles against the darkness, the cage waits, suspended, empty, yet alive in memory. It is a monument to human cruelty and endurance, a symbol of the ways in which confinement, shame, and exposure can become instruments of terror. The scavenger's cage endures not in iron or wood, but in imagination, legend, and the whispered understanding that some forms of suffering are measured not in hours, but in the slow, patient erosion of dignity, hope, and the human spirit itself. What terror is born with stillness itself becomes an instrument of suffering. Imagine a device shaped like a coffin, yet not intended to grant rest, but to impose restraint, to compress body and spirit in measured, unyielding pressure. Known in whispered chronicles as the coffin rack, it was designed to bind the condemned within iron and wood, their body pressed into angles unnatural, their breath shallow, their mind caught between fear and desperation. In its embrace, silence is both punishment and teacher, and the weight of confinement becomes a master of agony. The setting is the shadowed dungeons of 16th century Europe, where authority and superstition intertwined, and punishment was as much theater as justice. Stone walls glisten with moisture, floors echo with faint drips, and the air is thick with anticipation. Torches flicker, casting erratic light over the coffin rack, a device carefully constructed to confine and compress. To immobilize and torment without spectacle, the condemned is led forward, their body small and slight against the massive form of wood and iron, straps and braces adjusted with deliberate precision. Each inch of movement is denied, each breath measured, each pulse magnified by anticipation and fear. Its cruelty is both physical and psychological. The coffin rack forces the body into a cage of rigid angles, compressing limbs and torso with a precision that leaves the